Welcome to Sailing the East. Hello, I'm Bela Musitz.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
This is our podcast about sailing the east coast of the United States. In some episodes, we will focus on destinations. In other episodes, we will talk about boats, equipment, and techniques. And when we come across an interesting person, we'll try to get them as a guest on the show.
But what makes this podcast unusual is that only one of us sails.
Yeah, that would be me, Bela. I have been sailing for over 30 years. Not across oceans, but on lakes and coastal cruising on the east coast of the United States.
And I, Mike, know very little about sailing. As a matter of fact, I don't know port from starboard, and a tack is something other kids put on my chair right before I sat on it when I was in elementary school. So I will ask most of the questions, and Bela, of course, will provide the answers. Bela, in our last episode, you gave us some great history and shared your impressions of an overnight sail from Marion, Massachusetts to Port Washington, New York. Where are we off to today?
Well, Mike, when we got to Port Washington, we decided to spend some time there. It was a very nice place, so I thought we'd give you a little bit of description of that in this episode. So Port Washington is on Manhasset Bay, which is on the north side of Long Island, and it's near New York City. So it's a great stopover when you're transiting the East River and heading south or north via New York City.
Okay, so I think I have this on my mental map. We're pulling into Manhasset Bay from the northwest, kind of toward New York City, and Port Washington, I've got this right, runs kind of along the eastern shore of Manhasset Bay. So as we're coming in, it's on our left, okay? And I know this, my cousins grew up in Dix Hills, which is a bit southwest of there on Long Island. So I know the general area from the land side, but I've never been to Port Washington. Tell me about it.
Well, Manhasset Bay is beautiful, right? It's mostly private homes. When you're sailing, it's interesting. You really get a different perspective of the landscape because you see it from sort of a different angle that you normally don't see things from because you're seeing them from the water. And you can definitely tell there's sort of industrial sections that are close to the water, and there's residential sections that are close to the water. And this harbor, in particular, Manhasset Bay, is very residential. And I would say that it's high-end residential. So lots of mansions, beautiful, beautiful, huge mansions along most of the shore. And some of these mansions are sort of the old classical-looking mansions that you see in movies and things, and others, it's interesting, are very modernistic-looking, almost like something from the Jetsons. So it's this real combination of sort of new and old, a nice blend. So it's a very nice bay. It's a large bay, and it's really kind of cool. Highly recommend it.
Nice. Anything special about the town of Port Washington that you can tell me?
Yeah, so this bay, Manhasset Bay, with all of these mansions, was actually the filming location, or one of the filming locations, for the movie The Great Gatsby, which was, sort of chronicled the high life, or the high, rich, wealthy life of individuals, I think around the turn of the century. So that sort of gives you an idea of the sort of size and magnitude of the homes on this bay. Right here in Port Washington. And there's actually a Great Gatsby boat tour that you can, of course there is, that you can sign up for that'll take you around to the various different houses. And I'm sure the person, we didn't do this, but I'm sure the person there has some knowledge about, different houses and who owned them and the history of them. So it's really cool. What we did was we hopped in the dinghy. So the dinghy is sort of the car for those people who have boats, right? Because you take your boat, and it's a big boat, and if you're not in a marina, you're anchored out or you're in a mooring, you got to get to shore somehow. So you have a smaller little boat. Ours happens to be about a 9-foot dinghy that you hop on, and we have a little motor on it, and you can zip back and forth between the boat and shore. And we also hopped in it and kind of zipped around the harbor and, did our own Great Gatsby tour. And just oohed and ahed at the various different houses and estates, I should call them, not houses, they're estates, that surround the harbor there. It was really kind of cool. So Great Gatsby tour. The other interesting thing is you don't see this very often. You do on occasion. The town of Port Washington actually runs and owns a whole bunch of moorings that you can tie your boat up to. So it's they're trying to promote tourism. They have come to the conclusion that people on boats, when they stop someplace, they typically come ashore and spend money because that's either for food or the restaurants or supplies or they do the normal tourist thing. So they have a very nice mooring field there, as well as there's marinas there, and there's actually even an anchorage where you can just drop an anchor there.
Interesting. So what did you do when you were there?
Oh, yeah. So we got a mooring ball. And again, like I said, it was run by the town. And when we were there, it was interesting way they did this. The first night was free. So you don't have to pay. Normally, you have to pay for a mooring ball, some nominal fee. Mm-hmm. So the first night was free. And the town also runs a water taxi. So instead of having to take your dinghy and you use that, they actually have a water taxi service that I think runs from like 8 in the morning to 8 p.m. You call them on the radio, and this guy comes out in a little boat, picks you up, and takes you to shore. And so the first night for the mooring ball is free, but the water taxi is $8 per person. But after the first night, the mooring is $25 a day, and then the water taxi's free. So somebody came up with that algorithm, just to make it complicated. But the moorings are really nice. They're relatively close to shore. They're in the more protected part of the bay, so that's nice. There is an anchorage just outside the mooring field where you can drop your anchor for free, and the water taxi will come out to pick you up there, and then it's $8. So that works well. The anchorage is not really well protected from a northwest wind. So if you're going to get a blow out of the northwest, you're going to roll around at night. You're going to roll around in the anchorage. But any other winds, it's well protected. There's 3 or 4 marinas in the bay that they all have fuel. They have pump out. They have showers, etc. So that's really nice. The town is an easy walk. I mean, it's basically the marina's downtown, or the town dock where the water taxi is going to take you is fundamentally downtown. So you get off of it and you're on Main Street, so to speak, close to all sorts of restaurants and shops. And there's even a West Marine. So West Marine, Mike, is sort of the Home Depot of the marine industry.
Everything from tools to clothes to dinghies to you name it, right?
Anything you need for your boat, West Marine has or can get for you. So you're in a boating town when there's a West Marine in town. So that was quite nice. There's even a town library that you can stop into, read the newspaper or whatever. So it's quite a nice little place.
And you piqued my interest as always, and then you didn't go there. But tell me about the food. That's always my most important question. Where'd you eat? Any recommendations, Bela?
So actually, I would say this was one of the highlights of Port Washington. There's really a lot of nice restaurants that are a 5 to 10 minute walk from the water taxi dock. We had a nice Korean food one night, and it was a very nice restaurant, and it's called Narateno or Naratet. All right, let me spell it for you.
Narinato.
Narinato. See my notes. Yeah, Narinato. Thank you, Mike. English is a second language for me, so it's just always a challenge, as you know. The food was great there. If you like Italian, there's DiMaggio's Tortilla. Boy, that was really good. And my favorite, of course, I can eat pizza almost any time. And Peppo Rosso was really good for pizza. So those are just a couple of the choices. Again, what you should get from this wide variety. Port Washington's a pretty, nice-sized town. And a lot of little boutique stores, little shops, not a real touristy town. So it's not like, 4 T-shirts for $25 type of place. It was much nicer than that. And but a lot of little boutiques, a lot of good restaurants, a really nice place to spend a few days. We were on our way heading south, so I think we spent three days there, 2 nights and 3 days there. And part of it was waiting for a weather window because we were waiting for a particular type of weather. And then we had to go through the East River. So we were transiting New York City. And as I mentioned in the last podcast, when you're going through the East River, you want to get the tide in your favor. You want to run with the tide because the currents in the East River can be 2 to 3 knots very easily. And being on a sailboat, we only go about 5 or 6. So when you get a nice 2 or 3 knot push, now you're going 8 to 9. And if you're going against it, you're only going 3. So we wanted to get the timing right and get the right weather to kind of get through New York City. So we spent a couple days there, and it was really nice. I highly recommend it. Just a really pleasant place. The guy who ran the water taxi was super friendly and very informative. You ask him, like, where's a good place to eat? And, he knew all the places. You ask him, hey, I'm looking for a hardware store, or I'm looking for a good bookstore, etc. Really helpful folks. And they really roll out the red carpet for sort of people passing through because, again, like a lot of towns, they've come to understand that it's good business, makes good economic sense.
Interesting. Sounds great, Bela. Port Washington seems like a kind of place that's worth visiting. You've got history, you've got beautiful architecture. It sounds like you've got great facilities and, of course, some really great restaurants. So, yeah, I'll put it on my list. Let's wrap it up, listeners. Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this episode interesting and thought-provoking. If you have questions about what we've discussed, feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. Or better yet, tell your friends about it. We're trying to build our listeners. We're relatively new here. And we also really appreciate any comments you might have or any thoughts or suggestions, as Mike said. It's always good to hear those from our listeners. So signing off from upstate New York. Until next time, see you, Mike.
Thanks, Bela, from over here on the shores of the River in Münster, Germany. Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah, fair winds and calm seas to all.